From the land of conjurers flying through the internet to your device like a UAP, hauntingly unexplained and downright weird, this is the witching hours, and we are ready to take off in the flash of an eye. Good evening to one and all, wherever and whenever you are listening to this program. I am Giant of the Frost, and joining me as always is Medium Jenny Lee. How are you doing, Jenny?
I'm doing okay today. How are you?
Good. We're here at a special time and a special day for our guest. We got started. I think this is the first time we were actually a couple minutes early instead of a couple minutes late. So there we go.
First for everything.
Welcome in, hoaxers. How are you doing this Saturday? Hope you're doing well. We have a good show for you today. We have a lot to discuss. We'll get to that in just a little bit. But I guess first we can go ahead and start with the news, Jenny.
Yeah, let's do the weird news. You ready? What do you got for us today?
All right.
We already had one news segment this week, and there was a lot of stuff. There must be even more things.
There's so much news right now. If you've been keeping up with all this stuff, and we're not going to even get into the alien UFO stuff.
No aliens today.
No aliens today, but we do have space stuff. So NASA is back in touch with Voyager 2 after an interstellar
Oh, yeah,
shout.
I saw that.
So earlier this week, NASA had kind of messed up and lost the signal with Voyager 2.
It kind of messed up.
So NASA has succeeded in reestablishing full contact with Voyager 2 by using its highest power transmitter to send an interstellar shout that righted the distant probe's antenna orientation, the space agency said Friday. Launched in
it from its slumber.
Yeah. Launched in
Wakey.
Launched in 1977 to explore the outer planets and serve as a beacon of humanity to the wider universe. It is currently more than 12.3 billion miles from our planet, 19.9 billion kilometers.
Wow.
Well beyond the solar system. A series of planned commands sent to the spaceship on July 21st mistakenly caused the antenna to point 2 degrees away from Earth, compromising its ability to send and receive signals and endangering its mission. The situation was not expected to be resolved until at least October 15th, when Voyager 2 was scheduled to carry out an automated realignment maneuver. But on Tuesday, engineers enlisted the help of multiple Earth observatories that formed the Deep Space Network to detect a carrier or heartbeat wave from Voyager 2, though the signal was still too faint to read the data it carried. In an update on Friday, NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, which built and operates the probe, said it succeeded in a long-shot effort to send instructions that righted the craft. This so-called interstellar shot required 18.5 hours traveling at light speed to reach Voyager, and it took 37 hours for mission controllers to learn whether the command worked, JPL said in a statement.
Wow. Talking about having to just sit around and wait.
Yeah.
It was like 4 days, 4+ days, or almost 4 days went by before they got every signal back. Wow.
Yeah, and then there's just some interesting information on here about Voyager 2. So it left a protective magnetic bubble provided by the sun called the heliosphere in December of 2018 and is currently traveling through space between the stars. So it's no longer in our solar system. The effect of the sun doesn't have any effects from our sun. Before leaving our solar system, it explored Jupiter and Saturn and became the first and so far only spacecrafts to visit Uranus and Neptune. And of course, Voyager has a twin. Voyager 1 was the first spacecraft to enter the interstellar medium in 2012, and it is currently 15 billion miles from Earth. Both have those golden records, the 12-inch gold-plated copper discs intended to convey the story of our world to extraterrestrials, which includes a map of our solar system, a piece of uranium that serves as a radioactive clock, allowing recipients to date the spaceship's launch, and the symbols that convey how to play the record.
Wow. I didn't realize that those things were on there. How interesting.
They will continue to wander the Milky Way, potentially for eternity. In silence.
Yeah.
In silence. Story 2, leprosy appears to be on the rise in Florida.
I predicted
You predicted that?
Yes, I predicted leprosy and bubonic plague coming back.
Oh, goodness, Charlie.
Sorry.
No problem.
It's not your fault.
I manifest it.
So,
leave it no offense, people from Florida, but leave it up to Florida to bring leprosy back.
Yeah. A 50-year-old Florida man diagnosed with leprosy adds to a growing number of cases detected in the southeastern United States, which appears to be a new hotspot for the disease. It follows recent alerts from the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention of the first cases of locally acquired malaria in the U.S. in 2 decades, 4 of which were in Florida. Leprosy incidence or rates of new leprosy cases has been increasing in southern parts of the U.S. since 2000, with reported cases more than doubling in southeastern states over the past decade. Central Florida now accounts for almost 1/5 of U.S. cases. Yet a shrinking proportion of U.S. leprosy cases are diagnosed in people born outside of the country, while a growing number of reported cases appear to lack any of the typical risk factors of the disease. These trends, writes the 3 dermatologists who alerted public health officials to the Florida man's diagnosis, continue to rise. Evidence that leprosy has become endemic in the southeastern United States.
Goodness gracious. Well, keep it down there, guys.
And leprosy.
It's so weird. I was listening to a Braca Goldsmith YouTube video yesterday. And she's an astrologist who does amazing videos, but she just happened to mention lepers as an example for something when she was talking about whatever the video was about yesterday. And I was like, lepers? It's like, what is this? Like 1500? And then here it is today.
Yeah.
We're talking about lepers.
Yeah. Yeah. Leprosy. I mean, that goes all the way back, to ancient, right?
Yeah.
It's also known as Hansen's disease, and it's a bacterial infection caused by Mycobacterium leprae and the more recently discovered M. lepromatosis. It is curable yet neglected tropical disease which still occurs in more than 120 countries. About 150 cases of leprosy are reported in the U.S. each year. But the 54-year-old man, a lifelong resident, told contact tracers that he had not been traveling or come into contact with anyone else known to have it. And so they're not sure how this man got the case of leprosy. The good thing is back in biblical times, it wasn't curable, and now it is. So.
And now it is. What did you say, Charlie?
Well, when it says he didn't come into contact with anyone who's known to have it, it's not like people are going to, either tell you or even know that they've got it. Or, because, what? So if he was in a room full of people and someone said, I've got leprosy, that whole thing just...
Yeah, and plus, the early stages of it, according to the article, the early stages of it could be like a million other things, because it just starts as kind of like, some lesions and some swelling, and, I imagine it would...
You wouldn't necessarily know that you have it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, we know that from, I think all of us, to a certain extent, have become some kind of more familiarized with disease outbreaks. I mean, the whole world went through the COVID thing. And, that's one of the things you learned is that people can be like, oh, I'm perfectly healthy. I'm going to go out and hang out with people and not realize that they were infected. And then 2 days later, they got the sniffles and they felt bad. And it turns out it was like a super spreader event or something. But
turns out they got leprosy.
Yeah.
Goodness gracious. They're bringing it back. Florida's bringing it back.
Florida's bringing it back.
Leprosy carries an energy. There was an area where I had to go and do a clearing of a gym, and the land that it was on, people had tracked or trailed across to get for healing in medieval times, and the land itself still carried the energy. So the leprosy itself invokes some kind of a signal in people. And now I don't know whether that is something that goes out into the universe or just stays in the land or what. that it has a signal, and when it goes into the land, it stays there. Because I felt it. I've literally felt that signal.
Wow. Yeah, I believe it.
Well,
I think that there's so many things that we don't understand about energy and how it stays in places.
Well, a few years
Yeah.
ago, I told you crazy if you'd have suggested that trees talk, but now that we know that trees talk, with literally with their roots and stuff, so we're all just energy and vibration, aren't we? Well, I hate to say it, but you get a mass energy where there's a number of people all experiencing the same thing, then it takes on an energy all by itself.
Yes, I
yeah, that's a good point, because and we covered the world, the Wood Wide Web on this show. We did talk about that, Charlie, but there's been such a historical stigma, and a lot of times when we talk about stigma about something, we're talking about 20th century or 21st century, but you're talking about a disease that's had a significant stigma around it going back to the most ancient humans. I mean, that was written about in the Bible, like people with leprosy being...
was one of the biggest insults that you could have thrown people years ago. You literally would call someone a leper if they were the last person you'd want to be around.
Yeah.
So it would be a massive insult.
Exactly.
Still has a negative connotation. Yeah.
And so the fact that some energy would have built up around that, that wouldn't surprise me at all. To continue with the next story, this is a continuation of what we talked about on Thursday's show, which is a superconductor levitates at room temperature. But questions still remain. So we talked about this discovery of, I think it was LK99.
This is a positive story.
that was put out by South Korean university researchers, and also just happened to also be put out by William and Mary science researchers, about a superconductor that could exist at room temperature, which would have some pretty major effects. And I'm curious, I can get into this in a second, but let me go on with the news story. So a lot of it was met with skepticism because there had been false claims put out before, and some of the research on it hadn't been peer reviewed. And so it's been a huge story in the science world over the last few days. It may just be another day for you and me, but the worldwide scientific community is still working around the clock to verify claims of a new superconductor that might yet revolutionize human civilization. Now, scientists at the Hwasong University of Science and Technology claim to have replicated LK99's levitation abilities at room temperature, which they showcase in a video uploaded to some website here, Billy. This is an encouraging sign. One of the superconductivity's hallmarks, magnetism due to the Meissner effect, seems to be a replicable feature of the copper-lead apatite compound. If only it were that easy to confirm the material's zero electric resistance capability and how it manifests. The clear-cut update is this. Despite the fact that researchers could replicate LK99's levitation at room temperature, there is still no successful replication of the announced room temperature LK99 superconductivity. For that to happen, both the Meissner effect, magnetic field, and zero electric resistance are required from the same sample. And while scientists have previously shown that LK99 does have zero resistivity at negative 163 Celsius, they haven't yet proven it has those properties at room temperature. And I just want to update this. I did see an article this morning with another university putting out some information that they got room temperature resistivity at negative 13 degrees Celsius, which is much warmer than negative 163. So you're talking about like a freezer temperature rather than an absolute zero. And people are speculating now, if you can get it at negative 13 degrees Celsius, that it's just a matter of finagling the material.
Like tweaking it.
And so things are looking like either way, there's going to be some huge ramifications from this finding. So we'll keep you updated as the scientists are hard at work trying to replicate this LK99. And this would be great to have someone on to talk about this that was more wise in the way of science. as Buddy Python would say. Yeah.
What are you talking about?
Who are you who are so wise in the ways of science? To have someone come on and talk about it. I don't know if Mark Hunter Brooks has been keeping up with this. We're going to have him on soon. I'll definitely ask him about this. But just from what I've read, it seems like there could be some huge implications. One would be the electrical grids. You would be able to transmit electricity without the expense that it is now. It would allow for things like levitating trains. It would allow for almost a complete shift in how technology is, how much technology costs, and how the advancement of technology. And the thing I was going to bring up earlier is when we get into talking about like stages of civilization, going from a type 0 to a type 1 to a type 2, all these kinds of things. If you're familiar with that, I'm curious if this would be another move from a type 0 civilization to a type 1 civilization.
Maybe it's a type 0.5.
Very big
we're
news
working
indeed.
on it. Yeah. Hopefully it's what they say it is, and that the funds are available for them to make it something that's available to everybody, and that greedy hands don't get a hold of it and make it something that it shouldn't be. Those are my hopes.
Which is true, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they have to weaponize it first, and then 30 years from now, 30 years from now, we'll get a levitating train, yeah. The last story for today is India's Chandrayaan-3 lander arrives in lunar orbit, and I'm sorry if I massacred that name. India will make its second moon landing attempt in 18 days' time after its spacecraft arrived in lunar orbit on Saturday. Does it
have people on it?
Actually, I don't know, and I don't know if this article states or not. I imagine it does. Yeah, I think it does, because they talked about the person saying they were caught inside the moon's gravity, so they weren't.
Oh, that's neat. So China has people going to the moon.
India
very soon. India. For some reason I thought you said China. Oh, India has people going to the moon. That's so exciting.
Is roughly 30-minute burn around 9:30 a.m. Eastern. Seeing the spacecraft enter an elliptical lunar orbit, the Indian Space Research Organization, or the ISRO, stated via social media. From here, the Vikram lander will separate from the mission's propulsion module and enter a 35 by 100 kilometer orbit in preparation for the landing. Final descent and the soft landing attempt is set for August 23rd. The primary landing site is in the vicinity of the lunar South Pole region, located at 69.37 degrees south latitude and 32.35 degrees east longitude. No previous moon mission has landed at a lower latitude. If successful, this will make India only the fourth country in the world to achieve a lunar landing, joining the United States, the former Soviet Union, and China.
Wow. How exciting.
I just find it completely crazy that you get countries like India that have got so much financial and political instability.
Very true, yes.
That are throwing money at putting men on the moon.
Mm-hmm. When instead of feeding their billions of people that are starving.
I feel like India is always been an interesting country because they have such a large population and they have large amounts of poverty and lots of humanitarian things that could benefit. But they've also been a technical superpower, and they're a nuclear power.
Yeah.
And so it kind of has this kind of dichotomy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, but it's not Pakistan. Pakistan's the same. With all their nuclear weapons and Pakistan's the same. It's just like, I just can't get my head around our countries prioritise, I can just find the whole thing a bit. But forgive me, I could be sexist here and say, when you get men in power.
Yeah.
Perhaps, Charlie. Perhaps.
So that is the news.
CMC just let us know that the Indian moon landing does not have people on it.
It doesn't. I was getting ready to ask to see if it did, because there had been a crash, I think.
they're dropping a rover on the moon.
Okay.
Is what it sounded like because I was looking at it too.
And I was getting ready to say, I think their last attempt had crashed, and it was like a disaster, but there was never like a mention of loss of life. So I was thinking that maybe it was unmanned. So let's do this real quick. If you were to Google Charlie Daniels, especially where we're at, I know exactly what you would get. You'd hear about Devil Went Down to Georgia and the long-haired country boy. But you would also find Chat to Charlie. So you would see Charlie was once one of the notorious madams in the UK as a media specialist in adult issues. She was even sent by the BBC to check out legal brothels in Nevada, as well as finding herself sitting on the trial of a serial murderer. Yet somehow, years later, Charlie ended up becoming a huge, successful psychic with clients all over the world. A hugely successful psychic with clients all over the world. Please welcome to the show tonight, Chat to Charlie Daniels. Welcome to the show, Charlie.
Hi. Do people actually get to see us as well, or are
Yeah, they get to see you. You're live on the interwebs.
Hi, yes, and it's nice to be speaking to you here in the UK, and hopefully to connect with some of your audience at some point.
Yeah.
Yes, we are saying hello and welcome in. Yes,
I must tell you, I did a radio competition, and it was to win £10,000, and it said, you've got to ring this number, leave a message, and then we'll call your name out. And I sort of went to the loo, came back, and heard them say Charlie Daniels. And then they played The Devil Went Down to Georgia. I think they thought I wanted a request. So that was it.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, it's hard work having the same name as a cat.
Yeah.
Got a massive beard.
You can't get away from it, apparently.
Yeah. And we're in the American South, and so we have lots of country music as a big thing. So I definitely knew. Yeah, it's
really
what you're going to find here.
Okay. It's really not known at all. When I work with the press here, and they've never heard of him. And yet I know he's absolutely huge in the States, and all of my American friends know who he is.
Yeah.
But we haven't really had the country and western bug like you guys have. We have phases of it, and like when Nashville came over here, there was a little bit of a phase. I'm a massive country fan, I have to say. Watching Yellowstone at the moment and following all the songs on that.
Well, it's funny because we actually enjoy a lot of British stuff. So
yes,
we watch a lot of Monty Python, and my grandmother used to watch a ton of like BBC like sitcom.
They used to play it on our PBS, the British sitcoms. Yeah.
So
I'm in a fan club for one of the biggest TV shows that was over in your neck of the woods. As in the States. And I don't know if you remember Hill Street Blues.
Yeah, I remember Hill Street Blues.
On Facebook for that. What's the biggest one, as far as I know? And of course, Hill Street Blues was a really big cop show. It was the first of its kind with the handheld moving cameras, and the predecessor to, like NYPD Blue and all of the ones that are very sort of sexed up and everybody's looking good and nobody's hair's out of place and the real deal. Yeah.
Well, that's all retro now, Charlie. We got I think like the Miami Vice era is kind of popular. Like you see all the.
Yeah, it's not going to come back, it is. And then I'll be sat there going, I remember this first time round. Feeling old at that point.
So to get started, it seems like you have quite the story to tell. Where would you like to begin?
I'll let you lead.
Okay. There's lots of areas we can enter into here, but I know in your bio it says that you became one of the most notorious madams in all of the UK. How does one achieve that title?
And then before we go into that, because I'm completely just ignorant of the whole thing, was that something that's legal there or no?
No,
Okay.
no,
So yeah, this is like underground stuff.
it was underground, but I didn't
Okay.
underground. That's how I'm notorious. Basically, I grew up in the care system. So as a little girl, I didn't have a stable upbringing. And as soon as I entered puberty, I started to become very vulnerable. I was very sexualized at a young age, wearing makeup early, really wanted to be loved, and got in with someone I shouldn't have. Everybody warned me. And the next thing, I was being groomed in sex work.
Mhm.
So I was a teenager by this point. I had a baby to feed as well, just to show you how chaotic my life was. And I ended up walking the streets and being beaten, raped, kidnapped, lots of if I have to say, it sounds like a Netflix series, but this literally was my story. And I just was incredibly strong. And one day just sort of thought, you know what, I took to the whole sex work thing like a duck to water. Most people it would destroy. But with me, I just sort of was like, okay, somebody wants to pay me money for something I used to give away. Why not? So I sort of took control of it. And then as time went on, I started working indoors safely. I worked in some, sauna massage parlours as they used to be back in the day. And eventually worked from a private house with a couple of girls. And those girls could see that I had some skills, in organising things. And I don't really know quite how it happened, but it went from me working indoors with a few girls to, well, actually, I do know. There was a woman who came to me who said to me, I own a parlour. I haven't got a clue. I'm not making any money. The place is a dump. The clients are awful. The building's full of rats, and I don't know where to begin. And I heard that you've got a few houses with girls working privately. And, I'll give you the keys to my brothel if, I can work for you. So I went in with Rent a Kill and got rid of the rats. Had to also sack quite a few of the girls that worked there because they were drug addicts and all the rest of it. That was the one thing I was never going to do, was work with drug addicts. And that's not a judgment thing, there before the grace of and all the rest of it. But I've always known that was a line for me. And so I opened this place up, and it was in a place in Yorkshire called Bradford, which is one of the Asian capitals of England. And it was an eye-opener. We had everyone from people who owned restaurants to the local mullah coming in, and it was an eye-opener. And then it went from there to owning another big parlour in Leeds. Then it went to private places in Wetherby and so on. And in the end, I actually had a large chain of places.
Wow.
And the story's bit comes from a few things. First of all, I've done an awful lot of TV work over here in the UK. And also part of my backstory, which I have never hidden, was the fact that actually prior to having the big chain of brothels, I actually went to prison for a violent offence. I'm not making excuses, but I was left for dead and I picked an object up. And I guess if I'd have killed the person, we would have called it temporary insanity. But I didn't. I maimed them. That I'm proud of. I was 21. I've been pushed as far as a human being could be pushed. And I ended up doing time in jail. And then when I came out, I was like, right, I am going to dedicate my life to the church and God. And, I'm going to go and do a university degree and all the rest of it. And it didn't work out that way. Within 6 weeks, I had lost all my funding for the university. I had lost my housing. I was back on the streets, and I just, not literally walking the streets because I went to work in a sauna parlour, but it was awful. Snow was coming down. There was a 1 bar electricity fire going on, and one punter made it in all night, and he took his parka hood off, and it was my university lecturer. And in that moment, I'm sorry to anyone who's out there as a Christian, but I was like, when Jesus was on the cross and said, "Why did you forsake me?" I don't think he was kidding. Sorry. Because I swear to you, I had given my life. I gave my life as a little girl. I was always in a Sunday school. I was always searching for that spirituality.
Mm-hmm.
But the sense of the spirit world has always been with me. And the sense of being spiritual has always been with me. So my life went on for a while like this.
Yeah.
And then there's a whole lot of other stuff in between that makes an entire book, so I'm not going to go into it now.
Which that book link is in the pinned up at the top with all of Charlie's links: website, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and her book link. So if you are interested in looking at the book, it's up there.
It's been Fish and Chip Ripper for a number of years now, so I'm really not trying to plug sales for it. But basically what happened then was I went from being in this situation, where I was living a certain life, had these crazy ass things going on, and I came to a crossroads. Mm-hmm. And that crossroads was where the universe said to me, now stop, walk into that spiritualist church and see what happens. Now, I was told at 13 that I was going to be a medium. I was taken along to a meeting by my foster mother's friend, and a medium came to me and she said, you are going to be, and then she paid some huge compliments. I'm not going to repeat them because it's going to sound egotistical, but she paid some huge compliments and kind of mapped out what was going to happen. I went home to my foster mother, repeated what was said, and she said, yes, you can go back there when you're 18 because you very easily, get an impression and all the rest of it. And they're clearly brainwashing you and all the rest of it. So I was kept away from the spiritualist church. Then, of course, as I've said, life went off track. But there I am, having gone through quite a lot in my life. And suddenly I'm at this turning point where I walk into the spiritualist church. And I woke up to the woman who was running it, who became a mentor of mine, and I was like, I can do this, I can do that, I can do this. And I was full of ego. And I was like, and I went up to somebody and I told them, and it turned out to be true. And she went, wait. So you're telling me that you were in the street, you went up to a random stranger, told him you could see his twin, that his twin was in military uniform, covered in medals, and that he's with him. And this guy's in the spirit world. I went, yeah. She went, you want me to be impressed that you went up to a stranger? Did you cover yourself in any protection? What's protection? The only time I'd heard of protection was condoms.
Yeah.
Did you sit the guy down and ask his permission to start telling him any of this? Did you ask him if he wanted to go for a cup of tea after? What was the state the guy was in when you left him? And that was the minute where I was like, oh, now I've got stuff to learn. Yeah. And I'd walked in and I was I'm going to be on that stage. Seriously. Not platform, stage. I'm going to be on that stage. And she was like, do you want to go and make everybody a cup of tea in the kitchen, dear? It started stripping me back, which is what had to happen. You know, it had to happen. And actually, if I'm completely honest, I have never completely given myself up to being a medium. I don't have a problem with anybody that is. But
okay, good.
Mediumship is something that I do, but I don't brand myself around it because it's not my remit. I don't believe that the universe ever, or the spirit world, intended me to, be centre stage in mediumship. That wasn't why they picked me. I believe that I was picked because of my backstory in order to help people move forwards, not look back.
I like that. But that's contrary to what you were told as a child. The woman in the spiritualist church said you were going to be this profound medium. And so do you feel like that hasn't happened yet? Or did you make the conscious choice that I'm not going to do that.
I'm kind of in limbo, if I'm honest.
Okay.
Because my church did not put me on the platform. I think that's because of my autism, and occasionally there's a bit of a potty mouth as well.
Yeah.
All right, so there's no filter. And I'm also very, very strong and outspoken.
Mm-hmm.
Never put me on the platform. And so I told myself if I wasn't good enough for the church, then I wasn't going to put myself forward as a medium. Now, in actual fact, I've then continued to do tarot card readings with my clients, but on numerous occasions, someone's come through from the spirit world.
Mm-hmm.
And that evidence, you know, and you know yourself that reviews speak 1,000 words. So I'm not going to say, you know, I'm this or that or the other.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, when there are reviews out there from people giving what I would suggest is the width of a gnat's ass evidence, you know, we're talking fine detail.
Mm-hmm.
And as, you know, as we know, that is just evidence of the life after and walking in the light and all the rest of it. So I don't know. I don't really. Do you know what? You'd have to define what a prolific or profound medium is, because I'll tell you what, I have no intention of being John Edwards.
Mm-hmm.
I love John Edwards. I love watching John Edwards. You know, I love all of these guys. And I've been on the inspirational speaker and I've done TV shows, but not to do with this. And quite honestly, I don't want that ego. I've spent all my life trying to shove that bitch back in the box. You know,
Yeah.
and I get this huge sense when they walk away that I've made a difference one-on-one.
Yes.
You know? And all right, years ago, when Lady Diana died, I have to say, I was like, okay, what is it that's just blown my world up? You know, one human being's died, and as a result of that, I'm asking myself, what, you know, change have I ever made for anybody? What good am I? You know, who would come to my funeral? What difference have I made? What mark have I made? And for years, I went down the wrong track of chasing legacy. Now, I think that the first thing that we do when we have a spiritual awakening or quickening is do this. And I'm actually writing a book at the moment, and the passive-aggressive working title is So You Think You Want to Save the World. But actually, the title's probably going to be changed into something along the lines of So You Really Want to Make a Difference.
Mm-hmm.
Because the thing is that especially today with the media, social media, TikTok and all the rest of it, people think that they have to have this big energy that serves everyone and makes a massive difference. And you know what? I will take the words of Gandhi when he says, be the light and the change you seek in the world. Tone it down. Gandhi had this fantastic platform. He had loads of followers, and this is prior to the internet. Do we really need a mass audience? And what does a mass audience do for us? It feeds ego, it feeds wealth, it feeds greed, it feeds the corruption of power. So to me, when we actually go, I'm going to be the light and the change that I seek within myself.
Mm-hmm.
And then if we can teach others to do the same for themselves. And I use this in relationships as well when I've got women in front of me who are sort of saying, a man will be the light at the end of my tunnel. And I'm like, well, you know, man or woman, whatever. But, you know, honey, you have to be your own light.
Mm-hmm.
Be your own change.
Yeah.
Often when people come for a reading, and I'm sure you find this, Jenny, I think they think that I am going to be like the Disney waving the magic wand, fairy godmother. So if they ask it, that I can make it come true, or that I'm going to see that happening. And, you know, some questions are rather like someone saying to me, you know, am I going to lose any weight? It's like, well, hang on a minute. Are aliens going to abduct you and throw you back down a couple of stone lighter? Is someone else going to abduct you and force you into a bariatric bypass? Or do you think this might just depend on, or, you know, whatever actions a person's going to take or not take? And people don't know the difference anymore between destiny and free will. They think every fart is written in the wind.
Well, you know, you bring up some really good points there. some conversations we've had lately of
I think we were just talking about it today.
maybe last night.
Yeah, last night. Mm-hmm.
We were talking about there's a huge focus right now on spirituality, on like manifesting abundance. And for a lot of people, I think that is in monetary form and success form. And, you know, I brought up the question to Jenny, I think it was yesterday evening. Does the universe really want you to have a massive abundance monetarily? Because it can create so many more issues. Now, I'm not talking about being able to pay your bills, but to become, you know, wealthy and these kinds of things. Because when you look at most spiritual leaders who have respect, they usually work, the Buddha and Jesus and all these people we look back historically, we're talking about how you don't need those
without
things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
so what's your thought on that?
I'm glad you asked me that, because it just gave me a few seconds to be able to go through my tarot cards, which are from an American lady, lovely lady, and Julia Kutcher-Watts, I think she's called. So when I think of abundance, there are two cards in this deck that jump out for me. I'm not going to reveal their generic values, because anyone who reads tarot will start going off on a tangent. So I'm just going to show the images. So what we've got here is one card that looks like it's, harvest festival, as we call it in England, or I think you call it Thanksgiving or whatever, where we bring everything in and show, what food there is and celebrate, and all the rest of it. And then there's this other card where you've got literally Egyptians in white and gold with a yacht in the background. All right. Now, some people's idea of abundance, so let's say when you've been, as I was when I was younger, homeless, on the streets, having nothing, would be a roof over your head and food in your tummy. Today, a lot of people's version of abundance is Louis Vuitton matching suitcases and a yacht.
Yeah.
Right. Now, am I saying that I wouldn't buy a yacht if I had millions? Wants to buy me one, by the way. But actually, what I am saying is isn't it interesting that most people would read that card in that way visually? Because when I first got this deck quite a lot of years ago, that was the mentality, that this was the basic and that this was abundance. I now know that this is abundance. It's not basic. That's arrogance of the human behaviour that shows that we think we're entitled to that. And this is excess or wealth.
Yes.
But not only that, where I get this card occasionally coming up because of its generic value, which I said we're going to ignore, but where we get it coming up to that, we're talking about an improvement in lifestyle. So I'll be doing a reading and maybe someone's got this and I'll say, hey, you've got room for more meat on the bone, but you're doing okay. And now you're looking for some improvement, a better quality of life. When I was younger, yes, that would have been monetary in value. But in 2020, when I had cancer, that money wouldn't have meant anything to me. Well, not unless it could have instantly cured me, which I'm sure it would have done, because I would have still had the same treatment that I had. So then you could look at it from another point of view. I actually had private medicine, which not everyone in the UK can afford. So I actually had the best medicine. So it's all open to perception, interpretation, and whatever. But I've come to the understanding that, I have clients who tell me that they are in a terrible state financially. And when I dig a bit deeper, they mean they can't afford the service for their BMW car.
They're extra. They can't afford their extra.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then with me having a reading, And I'm not the cheapest girl because I'm taxed, I'm insured, I've got software, I do marketing, I run it as a professional business. And there are people that do it under the table, don't pay tax. I'd like to say to those people, hey, spiritual is as spiritual does. But anyway,
Yeah.
What I'm trying to say is that, I'm not the cheapest around, and they're spending money with me and then complaining, that they've got money. These are first world problems.
Yes.
You know what? I learned this from prostitution as well, or from sex work, as I prefer it to be known. You know what? Women used to get into sex work out of a place of poverty. So the only way women ever used to get involved in sex work was because they had to feed their kids, or they were starving, or maybe they'd been trafficked or tricked or put on drugs or whatever. So, originally it was a feeling of having no choice, or feeling of being driven by something or whatever, all right? Today, lots of women go into the sex industry, not from a point of poverty, but from a point of greed. And what you were talking about earlier, about manifesting abundance, that is sickening, because for me, that tunes in to a very narcissistic greed that most people try and make out is the other person, And I read all sorts of inappropriate things. Like I read the other day, do you want to do a course in learning how to make money out of talking to dead people?
Oh, yeah. Good Lord.
Right? Tell you 1,000,001 ways why we don't refer to it as talking to dead people, for number one. And number two, why you should run for the hills when you see courses like that advertised.
Yes.
Yeah.
We've taken, and I can talk, somebody with an ego, someone who's been on TV, an ex-whore if you want, someone who's been to prison for a violent offence. But I'm in the position that I'm in because I wasn't an angel, and because I can see the wood for the trees, and I can see the snakes in the grass as well. And the spiritual world is just as toxic as every other world I've been involved in.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But there are a lot of people out there who give our industry a really bad name.
Just like everything in all time, forever and ever.
Yes.
That's what humans do, unfortunately.
It is, but this is more sickening because there's no regulation, certainly not in the UK. There's not any real regulation. And people are doing it from the point of view of under the table and not being accountable. And so for me, the idea of, because I was groomed, of being exploited for money is abhorrent. Absolutely abhorrent. So any suggestion that what I do means that I'm a con artist or anything like that, that really is upsetting to me. And people have used it to gaslight me in the past into doing free readings and things like that. But actually there are people out there who genuinely do that. And so that means that there is a lot of hate towards what I do. And I understand that as well. You know what? The biggest amount of hate that I get are from so-called Christians. I get that all the time. And yet, if we attack other religions, we're breaking the law. Now, I don't define as a spiritualist, but spiritualism, which actually started in the Victorian times, is a religion. And yet I really think it's open season to assassinate anyone who's a spiritualist.
Yes.
And then people get confused as well with spiritualism and spiritual. And I was laughing the other day, somebody was turning around to me and saying, I'm spiritual, and she's rubbing a crystal around the neck, and this is after she's just slapped a friend of mine.
Oh, my goodness.
Hang on a minute, you're rubbing a crystal to define that you're spiritual? Yes, I've got lots of crystals, and I've got tarot cards, and I'm like, oh, you just feel like you have to stop and educate the whole world. Excuse me, let's get back to Forrest Gump. Spiritual is a spiritual stuff.
Yeah. Wow.
Well, there's a couple things I wanted to hit on. Let me go back because I don't know how much we'll talk about sex working in this show, but I did have a question about that. And, there's been a movement, and of course, they have legal brothels and stuff like that in Nevada, and it's becoming a thing where I know a lot of in social media with like the younger generation, there's been a lot of work being done to like destigmatize it and stuff like that. And maybe a kind of another movement around that. My question about that is though, and it seems like that, obviously was your case where the people who are in the sex working trade are being groomed and being abused and coming from a place where it's obviously not a healthy situation or a situation that you want to back. Like you don't want this to happen to people to be in this business. However, did you see, what do you think about that in terms of it, of having legalized sex work and stuff like that? Where are there women who would actually do that of their own accord and enjoy that business?
Yes, okay. There are. And I defend the right of any woman to sell her own body. For whatever reason, I don't care whether it's to sell kids or because she likes an extra orgasm a day, I really don't care. Mm-hmm. I defend the right of any woman to sell her body. But we're mixing up a lot of different things here, mm-hmm. because you have to forgive me, but you've sort of lumped everything in together. And what you've got to understand is the girls that are of addictions and stuff don't work in legal brothels.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure. Mm-hmm.
They can't. So you're always, while there is legal brothels, unfortunately, you're always going to have a group of women who work legally and a group of women who work illegally. And then you're going to say, well, why would men go to the group of women that work illegally? Well, there are a number of very dark reasons, mm-hmm. We don't get into that.
Yeah.
But what I will say is that, yes, there are women who choose. But I came back convinced that legal brothels was not the way ahead. So after spending years and years and years campaigning for the legalisation, for running places like I did where the police were allowed to come in and check up on everyone, where the fire brigade would come and test the alarms, probably more times than they needed to. That's a whole other story. Having worked to get the industry above board, having worked to get it legalised in the UK, and then went out to America and saw how Nevada organised legal brothels, I felt physically sick and came back and said, we don't want this, on a number of levels. First of all, we didn't need it, because by then what came into the UK was a big sex work site, very similar to eBay. And this site protected women because people would have profiles and you could choose to deal with people who were verified or not verified, who had feedback or didn't have feedback. And we all know cases on eBay where it's gone wrong. But in the main, eBay protects the buyer and the seller. Or certainly more the buyer these days, but that's another story. So this particular website meant that girls could work on their own legally. Now, the only problem for me is on your own is still vulnerable. So I wanted to see the UK make it legal for one girl to work from home with a maid. But unfortunately, under legal law, if there are two women present when the police come in, it constitutes a brothel. So I, in the end, came back from Nevada. I must tell you, women were being treated like cattle. You know, it was sickening. I went to, there was one guy called the Hoff. Really did not like that guy. I'm sorry, it was sickening. I went into this place. I think it was called the Bunny Ranch. And he put his arm around this petite blonde and he's like, do I have my favourites? Of course I do, and all this sort of thing, right? And at the time I felt a bit queasy, but I couldn't put my finger on it. And then I went back to the motel because we were flying back to Vegas the next day and put the TV on. And there was footage of him from 20 years ago with his arm around a different blonde saying the exact same phrase. Mm-hmm. And I was like, yeah, because you're for real, aren't you? Mm. Only that, but it was like creepy. You know, it's like if I want these women, I will do, because I'm the Hoff, I'm the king, you know? And the thing that it had in common with the Mustang Ranch, which was the complete other end of things. I mean, the Mustang Ranch was a fabulous building. You know, it was an incredible sight to behold. But all of the women were dressed like cheap tarts. They all had, forgive me, ladies, I'm sorry, but they had no choice. They had to wear tight fitted lycra outfits, you know, and I just was like piling women up like cattle, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, it didn't sit right with me, and I know that I was a madam, but the girls that worked with me because they wanted to. I never once made anybody work against their will. I used to get the different agencies to provide them with what they needed, keep them safe, etc. And all I wanted to create politically was a conversation in the UK whereby we looked at how women could work safely. And I managed to have that conversation numerous times on the media. And then in the end, I started to realise that all I was doing was being used by the British media and having to recount the horrors that I'd lived when I was younger. And I was like, you know what, I've moved on, my life's moved on. I can't save the world, so I just need to go into the spiritual lane, into the light lane, and do what I can one-on-one with clients and just leave all that behind. So I did.
Wow. Incredible story. So going into the psychic work, and I think you specifically refer to yourself as a clairvoyant, correct?
Yes.
So I've had this conversation with many people who have, as you know, are sensitive or have psychic abilities, and there seems to usually be a running theme between a lot of people that have these abilities, that there is trauma that happened that kind of triggered it. So I wanted to see what your take was on that. Like, if you think that, yes, that your trauma helped trigger your psychic abilities, or did you notice that you had them prior to? Like, what do you think about that?
Definitely linked, but it's all of the above. I'm third generation. And my story is very complicated because I was actually in the care system. So I didn't know I was third generation until quite recently. But my granny used to read the tea leaves, was actually in Belfast when all the IRA bombings were going off and stuff like that. I'm absolutely convinced that trauma is imprinted down the generations. I'm starting to look into the theory behind the Akashic records at the moment to see if what merit there is in that idea. But I also believe that neurodivergence is linked as well, because I'm fairly sure that my mother and grandmother, although my mother, as far as I'm aware, didn't do this. My grandmother did. As you may know, Jenny, it usually skips a generation. So, as far as I'm aware, both my mother and grandmother were neurodivergent like I am. So I've got ADHD and autism, as well as a few other things. And, I'm convinced that the way that, for example, I process time is different. So I'll tell you how to explain this. When I have a seizure, I go forward in time and I see stuff, and then I come back and report it.
Wow.
So one year, Christmas table, one of my gorgeous gay friends came round, dressed the table, put some huge flowers in the middle. Our church had been, our spiritual church back then had been talking about how flowers carry vibrations. And I was like, what? And they were like, yeah, flowers carry healing, love and vibrations. And I'm like, oh, I've spent a tenner to come to this workshop and wasted a Saturday. More bull that somebody's trying to teach me. So I was back then.
Mm-hmm.
There I am, staring at these flowers. Suddenly go into a seizure. The flowers started trembling. So the flowers were carrying vibrations. And they were tropical flowers, so they're going like this. And I'm staring into these flowers. And according to my daughter, who sat at the far end of the table, was thrown back into my chair. Whites of my eyes came up, and I had one of my full-blown tonic-clonic seizures. And I'm foaming and flapping around and everything. And I don't have those now because I'm medicated. But then I came back into the room. And when I say came back into the room, I mean I left the room. My soul left that room. And I came back into the room and my daughter said, Mum, are you okay? She knows not to make a fuss, so she left me for a minute and then came and said, Mum, are you okay? And I turned around to her and I said, there's going to be an earthquake. There is going to be a massive earthquake. And 24 hours later, the tsunami struck.
Oh my goodness.
Wow.
And the thing is, I didn't see it because we'd made a pact. We'd said that every single Christmas, it's the same thing. You get these terrible news stories. They find stories about people who've burnt to death in house fires. And, and we said, right, we're not going to do news. We're not going to do radio. We're not going to do TV. We're not going to have visitors. We're not going to have our phones on. We're going to play Scrabble, walk the dog, walk in the woods. And I'm glad we did. Because when she put the TV on 5 days later and they were still cleaning the beaches up in Thailand, and I'm going, oh my God. And she's going, nah, there's just been a bit of a storm, Mum. And I was like, all the hairs. In fact, now
I got chills when you said it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I couldn't comprehend it. And I think, if I'm honest, I still don't. But I know the universe was trying to protect me. Because the problem with my autism is I get extreme emotion as well. I don't know how I would have handled that. I'm a dark empath, if I'm honest. I didn't come into being an empath naturally. When you're autistic, you have to be taught empathy and you have to learn it. So from my point of view, I learned to feel and then I can't switch it off. And managing that energy is very difficult. So I think the universe need to make sure that she doesn't see that.
Yeah.
So I see it coming, but not fully experience it. And that's happened a few things with things that I've predicted with COVID. I made a big public prediction about COVID as well.
Wow.
Well, that's interesting because you said earlier when we were doing the news segment that you'd also predicted the leprosy. Can you tell?
It's all linked. In 2019, there was a card that started coming up in this deck that I'm using. And it's actually of a cathedral with its tower on fire, and it's got a Gothic window. Mm-hmm. And I've been doing lots of readings, and this card was coming up in every reading. And when the same card comes up in every single reading for a period of time, I refer to it like they do on Google, and I'll say it's universally trending, just because people get what trending is. And I will, suggest that there is an energy at the moment that relates to that. And in 2019, I was getting, over and over again, similar situations coming up that were being reflected in this card. We, with this card, it showed the fire in Notre Dame, basically, which happened on April the 15th. So that kind of predicted that. And then I started looking into these universal energies. I hadn't realised I'd been shown them for years. And then once you've unlocked Pandora's box, that's it. You can't unsee what you now know. And I suddenly realised that, I've known about this stuff for years. So then it was like a case of, okay, so what am I getting from the 12-month predictions? Because I do 12-month predictions every year. And that's when the universe shows me the universal cycles. And what happened in 2019 was that I went public and said, there is going to be a cycle, and it's going to be a 2-year cycle. And I am going to tell you now, it's going to involve storms, fires, floods, plague, and pestilence. And when I said that, one of my dear friends in the United States did a meme with a bunker on and put tins in it. And then 6 months later, somebody was superimposing toilet rolls in the background, because here in the UK, that was the thing we ran out of.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did too.
We did too. Yeah.
It was like, everybody thought that I was a lunatic. And I also mentioned that along with these fires were going to be solar flares, which also happened. I also mentioned, various other things. We're talking over probably, I'd said, 70 different pieces of evidence that I was able to offer for this 2-year cycle.
Wow.
And then an explosive end to it, which is when we start then with Putin bombing the Ukraine, volcanoes start coming, and then we went into, and what it was is it was like a snake going round, But then when we got to the end of the 2 years, the whip tail, the tail of the whip or the snake starts sort of going on its own. And that was whipping up this explosive energy, which thank God has now sort of started to subside a bit. Mm-hmm. So this year, the energy has been, funnily enough, in line with Chinese astrology, even though I don't follow it, honestly, but I heard that it's year of the water rabbit. It makes total sense because we've got the fluidity and hope. So this is not the year to get big things accomplished for most people. This is actually going to be a year of plodding along, except for one thing. I have said there will be a massive outbreak of either a new strain of COVID or a new virus before the end of this year. And I'm frankly getting to the point where I'm waiting for somebody to turn around and say, well, you don't have to be psychic to work that one out, Charlie. Whilst at one time these things were quite rare, they're not really that rare anymore, are they?
Yeah.
Well,
but yeah, we did. I did say as well, I said I wouldn't be surprised if leprosy or bubonic plague came back. I actually voiced those words publicly.
And then here we are talking about lepers in Florida. Yeah. Oh, goodness.
Let's hope I'm wrong about the bubonic plague then.
Yeah, let's hope you're wrong about that one. Knocking on wood over here.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's interesting because something else we've been discussing on this program, and I don't know if how much of the news that you know, but there's just been a lot going on this year that's not necessarily negative, but it seems like we're being led in a new direction. In the United States, there was the subcommittee congressional hearing on UFOs. And so there's lots of UFO talks going on with our politicians and stuff in the United States, talking about how crashed UFOs have been retrieved, and it's kind of just become memed at this point, where Americans are like, kind of like, well, so what if there's aliens? I still got bills to pay, kind of thing going on. The news story we had earlier about the superconductors and technology, it just seems that there's wormholes was another story we had. It seems like there's a lot of information and technology, and things are kind of shifting forward. Do you sense that at all?
I'm going to change it slightly, and I'm going to say we have all these portals in our brain. And I'm going to say that psychedelics and other substances will prove that. And, so while we're investigating, what we think is happening in this world, one of the reasons that I think I travel forwards and then come back in seizures is because time doesn't work the way we think it does.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yeah.
And in my sleep, I'm still a sex worker who's made terrible choices, who's continuing that life, going down that path. So I'm having lives that are running concurrently. Now, when I first said that to my husband, who's a big sci-fi fan, he pointed out a work, I think it might have been Isaac Asimov, something to do with eternity or cycles and circles and stuff like that. And it doesn't really matter. But a lot of the theories that I've come up with, I've spoken to my husband about, and he'll go, sci-fi writer so-and-so said that. So a lot of the stuff that I'm experiencing, people have been writing about since, 1940s, 1950s and still. But, I worry, of course I do, worry about AIs. I do, because as you were saying earlier, when man makes a wonderful discovery, the first thing he does is weaponize it. Mm-hmm. And that does bother me. But I think the human brain is the one place that actually, I don't remember, was it Journey to the Centre of the Earth and stuff, wasn't there? But then there was also a really terrible movie, but I really enjoyed it, where they went inside a body years ago.
Invasion of the Bodies, yeah, Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, something like that. And I think that if there's anywhere we should be exploring, actually, it shouldn't be technology, it should be the human brain. Mm-hmm. And fascinated by it because of the portals that we've got. And I'm epileptic, and yet I've read a book called Seized by a lady whose surname is LaPlante, and she talks about temporal lobe epilepsy, and that everyone in history who had temporal lobe epilepsy, who's famous, people like Lewis Carroll and stuff, became prolific writers, got into hyper religiosity, and were having psychic stuff as well. So, when we were talking earlier about links between being psychic and trauma, that might not be so far removed if we start looking at the temporal lobe section of the brain.
Mm-hmm.
What if having brain injury brings us closer to being psychic? And does that mean that we're any less psychic? Probably not. It just means that something activated it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yes.
if that makes sense.
That's something we've talked about a lot. We've talked about that a lot with trauma itself being something that seems to be a catalyst for that. But
we
like
talked
you were
about,
saying,
we've also talked about the chemistry of the brain, and that there's, like the DMT chemical that people will take on their own to have, or even LSD that they'll take on to have some sort of experience. And I've wondered if our people that have abilities aren't kind of making some sort of brain chemical a little more than others when we're doing this work.
Autism, it's not about chemicals in autism, it's actually the wiring that's different.
Mm-hmm. The wiring, yeah. Mm-hmm.
That we could have endless discussions about that for sure. Yeah. And also about dopamine, because I think dopamine is very exciting because it plays a massive role in the study of ADHD and addiction. And a lot of people that I've met that are very psychic also are very ADHD. So I don't know. We could debate this one a wee while.
Definitely points to something with how the brain works.
Yeah,
for different people. Yeah.
And when it comes to drugs as well, some of the ancient shamans were using stuff like ayahuasca and stuff like that. But also, we're talking about now possibly looking at shrooms, especially doing microdosing. Very interesting conversation, but unfortunately for me, I'm so sensitive to chemicals, whether they're natural or not, that I'd be likely the one that would go on the trip and never come back. So I'm terrified of these things.
Yeah.
I've just been cleared for medicinal cannabis. So I've just had my first 2 nights on THC. I'm feeling, pretty cool. So I don't know. I mean, these, to me, it's like take the things from nature, but at the same time, we've got to be very aware of what they're doing. But I do think the brain holds the most in secrets, not technology.
Yeah, my favorite quote is one of my favorite quotes is from Salvador Dali, and he said that I don't need to take drugs because I am drugs.
Such arrogance.
But sometimes I feel that way about myself. It's like, as a teenager, everybody's experimenting with this, that, and the other. I'm like, I don't need to take that because I already got weird stuff happening. So I'm going to leave it be.
Yeah. Yeah, but you know what? I think as a teenager, you go through these stages of wanting to push your boundaries in a way that you stop doing when you get older.
Yeah.
To say I've got a couple of clients who've got major love dramas going on, and I just sometimes feel like, even though I'm obviously there to be a cheerleader, ass kicker, or whatever, and I honestly feel like getting them and shaking them back shoulders and say, "Look, in 5 years' time, you won't give a about this."
Yeah.
But sometimes I have to go, yes.
Mm-hmm. You got to meet them where they are. Yeah.
Well, and that kind of brings up what we were talking about with abundance earlier. You're talking about you're not going to care about this in 5 years' time. I kind of feel the same way about abundance. Like, you can be a millionaire and still be depressed. You can be a millionaire and still not enjoy your life. So I think what people need to focus on is their passion and like, what is going to make you happy? How are you going to be happy? And that could be your abundance.
But also, money is a platform for change. There's no denying it. I've been at both ends of the spectrum. I've been right nose to the pavement and I've been very wealthy. And right now, I consider myself having a world full of abundance, but I'm far from wealthy. So I think that what we've got to look at is what value we put on money. and
Mhm.
reinterpret that value. Just silly things. But, we spent years buying and selling antiques, and I once won 7 tables of antique china for a tenner or 20 quid or whatever. No, it was a tenner. And me and my partner were like, oh my God, we've hit the jackpot. No, we hadn't, because every single one of those pieces need researching, photographing, weighing, measuring, listing, And in the end, it all went into a container and got shipped off and sent out to another country, because the one thing that you cannot get back is time. I was on TikTok this morning, and there was a little treasure chest sometimes that appears on TikTok. And if you get a coin, and I was sat there for 3 minutes watching somebody speaking in a language, and then I was thinking, oh my God, at the end of my life, am I going to want those 3 minutes back to spend with a loved one? So, well, I'm off TikTok for at least 10 minutes, and that's the thing. We don't value time and quality time the way that we should,
Absolutely. Yeah.
And
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Well, the other thing is as well is that everybody thinks that life. I know I'm preaching to the converted when I say this to you guys, but everybody thinks that life is a journey that you've got to get to, and what we have to do is set each of these massive goals. Get the bigger house, get the bigger car, get the luxury holiday, or whatever it is. Reach those, but then once we've reached those, we set more.
There's something else. Yeah.
Yeah, actually stop and go, what if the train we've got on doesn't have a destination? What if it's just going round in a circle?
Yeah.
And then it's like, well, we then have to decide, are we going to look out of the windows or even look what's going on in the train? Because we're spending all our life focused on that destination, not to mention the fact we may never even get there. That's not the same as having hopes, dreams, ambitions, wishes, and all the rest of it. But it's just that way that society focuses on getting these things.
But you're not going to be happy until you get to that thing or you get to that place, not realizing that they can be happy the whole time they're working on getting to that place.
A card in my deck that clearly shows that, there are, well, the way I've interpreted it, actually it wasn't designed that way, but the way I've interpreted it is that as human beings, there are always 3 things that we are chasing, and that is someone, something, or a change. Those are the 3 things that we are always chasing. So someone, whether it's a partner, a baby, or someone to fix the fridge, something as in a house, a car, money, or a change as in wanting a different nose, wanting to be skinny, or wanting to be busty, or wanting a husband not to be an alcoholic anymore. So those are the things that human beings, I think, that we are constantly sort of chasing, someone, something, or a change. And then that back to what I said earlier about we've got to be the light and the change that we're looking for, not actually try and find it somewhere else.
Yes. Agreed. I wanted to go back to what you were saying about how when you were doing your readings in 2019, that the same card kept coming up over and over and over again, because I have noticed that for myself doing readings, that certain cards just continuously come up over and over again. And I had been thinking about it in the terms of, well, most people just probably need to hear this particular message at this time. But you noticed like a whole different layer of things going on, where it was like a global thing that could have turned into a prediction, and that just kind of opened up my Pandora's box, I think.
And here's the thing: do you remember there used to be a song, "Windmills of Your Mind"? Spiral in a circle in a wheel, ever ending, never la 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 la. Was it film, wasn't it? Yeah, my partner likes that song. Anyway, what I'm talking about, I am a Fruit Loop, it's true. Is this idea of cycles and circles in circles. So what am I on about? I'm on about the fact that when I gave these universal energies, it could be that universal energy is, for example, for my village. This is what's going on in my village. It could be that universal energy could be my county. It could be that it could be my country. It could be that it could be Europe. It could be that it could be the world. It could be that it could be that solar system. So, there's nothing that says in any of these predictions when they're universal to what level they are universal.
Mm-hmm.
During COVID, all of my empaths were going through shift, and they were all shifting and changing, and a lot of them were getting very, very depressed. And there was a lot of depression. And I spent a lot of my lockdown partly having the cancer treatment and partly serving my failing empaths. Now, I don't mean failing in the sense of I think they were failing, but they were flagging. They were becoming overwhelmed by people's energies. As usual, boundaries not being in place for most empaths. As usual, most healers being wounded. So I don't mean any of this in any negative way, Jenny, but I know by the fact that you're a much nicer person than I am, and I'm a dark empath, that I'd be talking about you in this category.
Yes, that's exactly what happened to me. Yeah.
Feeling everybody's pain, not knowing when to switch off, not knowing who you could help, how you could help, when you could help, or what to do with that energy, switching the news on and feeling possibly even suicidal or at least flatlining.
Yeah, it was awful. Yeah.
That's why.
Yeah, that's very true, because we got to the point during that, because I'm a news guy and I teach, and so part of me I have to keep up on that to be able to discuss it for my job. But it got to the point to where like the news was banned in our house, and it still kind of is. Like we don't watch the news with our children anymore.
Well, it's interesting you should say that, because I actually asked my husband to remove the BBC app off his phone, because I started to notice at the same time every day I had an arrhythmia, and it was actually because seconds before I'd hear and that is the dramatic tone from the BBC News app. And actually, there's a soap here called EastEnders, and the start of that starts with and it's and then it goes into this silly music. And that dum-dum, same as it's a vibration. Mm-hmm. And with any major news channel, normally you get something. You have one in the States, I don't know if it's CBS or whatever, and you actually hear the like the code or whatever. And what we don't necessarily realise is all of these sounds are vibrations that have an impact on us subliminally. Mm-hmm. And actually, one of the beaut things that I've learned, because I'm retraining as a DJ again. I know I've told you I'm a Fruit Loop, but I'm retraining as a DJ again. And I looked at the colour wheel they give you, because what when they train you properly as a DJ, you learn is that you can put music together by either whether it's major or minor notes, and that's all broken down by colour. Now, you can also do it beat matching, but for this, just stay with me. So, for example, a particular note will have a particular colour. And the guy who was teaching me actually showed me how you can resonate each of those notes with an emotion. He actually played me a note and said, "What are you sensing?" And I was like, "Grief." "Hey, let me play you another one. What are you sensing?" "Joy." So music is in itself that vibration that can change a whole world. And I really do believe that. I think if you want to go into this world and make a difference, write a great piece of music. I wish I could.
Yeah. I agree. Sound plays a much more important impact on us than a lot of people realize.
I'm actually doing healing work with it at the moment, because I've never defined as a healer, especially because I'm a dark empath. I've never defined as a healer. I've stayed away from it because it's like I always believe there's a bit of a dark or toxic side still in me that I've got to try and keep at bay. I'm never going to get rid of that because it's followed me through every lifetime. Mm-hmm. And maybe I need it to be able to show people the other side. I'm doing readings often and people are going, "Why would he do that?" And I'm like, "Because, let me tell you." And I'm like there thinking, "Well, I've done that, So I do think that sometimes we have to have someone who comes in who can sort of like see the dark side of it But with the healing, I'm starting to look at solfeggio frequencies, binaural beats. And because I learned to do meditation, I learned to teach it. Then I learned to do working with the vulnerable. It's ADHD. You do every certificate in the book and then get bored. Then I learned to do hypnotherapy, got bored of that. And then one day I had someone who was having a reading with me. And one card triggered a meltdown for her, and we uncovered some sexual abuse, memories. And I couldn't let her leave here without making sure she was safe to drive and in a good place and all the rest of it. So I had a number of things that I had to do before, she could leave the building. And that's when I put together this technique that I've now trademarked, which is called mental magic. So what I do with people who are suffering from PTSD, anxiety, depression, all of that sort of stuff, is I basically use 3 elements which on their own are not unique. So, the hypnotherapy is not unique, the meditation's not unique, the sound therapy is not unique, but I package it together in a very unique way that is all sound-based. So it's sound, breathing, hypnosis, and I've had, I'd say, quite dramatic results with it with people who so far I've only done it with my own clients. Not done it separate from my own clients because I feel like that's where it's at the moment.
So you're noticing they're noticing significant differences in their anxiety or depression, etc.
Yeah, but like I say, back to the 2-year cycle that we had, I was serving a lot of empaths who were depleted, and it's tricky because, let me just say something now. That the book that I'm writing at the moment historically shows that as human beings, we've got this, and it is an arrogance that says we've got the best way, whether it's best religion, best food, best language, best skin colour. We've, all the way through history, tried to go in and do the right thing. And there's endless tales of, I hate to admit it, but particularly with white people going into indigenous cultures and completely destroying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
No, it's not completely unique to white people, I have to say. But the biggest amount of history, that I've seen where this destruction takes place is with this idea. I mean, you guys are in the South, so you know more than anybody. But this idea of domination. And one of the things that we often think we can do is put the world right. Educate the world, put the world right. That's a very dangerous thing because people think that they're the one that's got the idea, that's the good idea, and that they need to push that onto everybody else. So when I'm sort of in the mix of writing this book about how do we change the world, I think we've just stopped looking at changing the world and start by changing ourselves, because if everybody did that, the internet is the stupidest thing. It really is the thing. Because on the one hand, you'll get a group of people, when Caroline Flack here in England killed herself, quoting, hashtag, what was it, be nice or be kind or whatever, all right? And those same people are the ones that are bullying other people online. And they recognise themselves.
Mm-hmm.
People, they never recognise themselves. So when Sinead O'Connor died, quite rightly, the musician Morrissey and another one, was it Alanis Morissette? I'm not sure, but another female outspoken musician. So I'm like, where have you been?
Exactly.
Sinead was talking about this, talking about that. Where were you? Craze. Because all of the internet is like, oh, Sinead compares to you, and
they abandoned her 30 years ago.
Yeah. I just lost a friend actually who was instrumental on an island that I go to in Greece in trying to change the politics to improve the life of the islanders. And he was French, he wasn't even Greek. And when he died, everybody was saying nice things about him because it was very unexpected. And one of my dear friends went on and went, who are you? Where were you when Eric wanted to change the rules? Where were you when Eric stood up for you? Where were you when he championed your business? And now you say you miss him?
Yeah.
I love that anger.
Mm-hmm.
I love that anger. Maybe that's the dark side of me.
Perhaps it is, Charlie.
Well, it's very true, and it's funny because you talk about so many times people don't get like their justification until after they're dead. But especially since we brought up Sinead O'Connor, that's one of the articles I've been seeing lately is how she was standing up against the Catholic Church many years before all this stuff came out about the Catholic Church and sexual assault on children by the priests and all these kinds of things. But no one, when all that came out, no one said, "Hey, look, she had it right." Instead, she was just kind of still made fun of.
Yeah.
Lunatic. And bless her, she was sailing pretty close to the wind with her mental health, but lunatic she wasn't. She's an incredible human being. But we were talking earlier, it's kept coming up about that card where we have the tower. So let me see if I can find that. Here we are. So this is the card I was talking about.
Mm-hmm.
When this obviously, was trending in 2019, as I've said, and then it turns out April the 15th, Notre Dame's tower caught fire.
Yeah, crazy.
In case you think that Julia missed that somehow, she actually drew the cathedral window on top.
Rose window, yeah.
Because 800 years ago, prior to Notre Dame, there was indeed a Roman temple where Notre Dame was. So when
Holy moly.
Yeah. So when that fire went off, I could be here all night with this one, I tell you. I was like, Spirit World, what do you want me to do? Because the old me wants to get all dramatic and go on Facebook Live and go, this card's been coming up in every reading. What does it mean? And then I was told by Spirit World, calm your ass down, dear. 4 hours. So I did. Put the news on, and Macron was stood in the smouldering ruins. And he said a few things that I will never forget. First of all, he said, we had to cut away a perfectly healthy section of the church. If we didn't do that, the fire would have spread. And I had to really process that. Then I processed the fact that he was saying, well, nobody died. We got everyone out. We got all the important relics out. And we will rebuild. And this is exactly what I've been telling every client. There is a fire that's coming into your life, and it is going to rip through like a tragedy. And in that moment, your whole world's going to shake. And then you're going to uncover years and years and years of stuff. And then you get to start again. Now, that's the synopsis. That's the tip of the cherry version of that story. But I have to say that it's not unusual that when I go to different areas, I can sense what I thought originally was church energy. This is ground that the pagans had used, and the Christians came along and slammed a church on it to control the pagans.
I got to go to Guatemala in 2008, and there was a beautiful, Catholic church, but the stairs of that church were the original temple, the Maya temple. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you what, near where I live, there's a place called the Dashwood Estate, and it was known for hellfire caves, and it's in a place called West Wickham. And funnily enough, we were talking about leprosy earlier. The land that carried leprosy, that carried the energy, is the same strip of land, but it went around the back of the gym that I had to do a clearance at. But anyway, at the top of that was this church, and there's these caves, and they're like, why did this bloke who's really rich, who had orgies, have this church? You go in the church, and I'm like, there's a weird energy here. And Darren went, yeah, this is my husband. My husband has always been a bit in tune because he's into sci-fi, but since we've been together, I've kind of like not trying to sound arrogant here, but I've opened his mind to looking at things slightly differently. But every once in a while, he's the one that spots something that I've missed. And we're stood there, and this church has got a dome on top, which is weird anyway. It's like a big gold dome. And there's a round section, and we're stood there, and we're looking at the floor. And Darren says, "What do you see?" And I'm like, "Oh my God, it's a pentagram." Not a church, it was a Masonic temple. Guide church. And then it comes out that Lord Dashwood was indeed a Mason.
Mm.
So, yeah, I start to look for these things now. A number of times we've gone down a country lane and I've gone, there's this down there, there's that down there, or that's a Roman road, or I can feel Civil War, or whatever. And he'll go, oh, stop it. And then we'll look it up on Google, and sure enough, we're in Devon once, and I'm like, oh, I can see men clubbing each other with clubs. And we looked it up, and there's this whole story about these men going around clubbing each other, So it's bizarre, but these are the energies that I pick up when they're just really strange energies.
That's awesome. Yeah. The energy holding the land. We were talking about that. The leprosy. Yeah.
Well, think about it. I mean, you know what I'm saying is really, not unique. The Native American Indians, have always known this. And I mean, the other thing is as well is I've detected, I'm going to rephrase that. I've detected that the world is very slightly off orbit. I noticed this during lockdown, and it felt like, if you imagine a football, and if you imagine that, let's say, the centre of the ball has a P, it feels like the P is not in the centre of the ball anymore. It's slightly out. Mm-hmm. Why time is not working the way it was before either. So whilst it never did move around the clock, in the same way as the world was never flat, I do feel as if we've gone slightly off axis. And I do feel as if we're going to have to reinvent the calendar all over again soon.
That's interesting, because one of the stories that Janet Frost found not that long ago was that the scientists are theorizing that the center of our Earth stopped spinning.
I'm not surprised at all. But you see, what I'm leading up to saying is the Native American Indians apparently had already had that discussion, because my partner said, well, that's not a new theory at all. And I'm like, huh? And he's like, because I'm Googling, said, look, Native American Indians have been saying it for decades. I'm like, oh, okay then. So I'm thinking of having all these unique ideas, and it turns out that people have seen all this before,
Yeah. The different Earths, they call it, the different Earths, different variations of civilization, apparently. Well, the Maya calendar ended in 2012, but it's not that the time was going to end. It's just that we're starting a different one.
We've got a great writer here in the UK, you guys. He's called Graham Hancock. I don't know if
yes,
we're very familiar with Graham Hancock.
In a poem as well. But yeah, I've been following him for years, and he's slowly but surely coming out. And what I mean by that is years ago, he was very focused on offering the evidence. He was focused on the science and sort of trying not to sound like David Icke. And now he's actually, as he's getting older and, thinking, do I really care what people think about me anymore? Yeah. He's really starting to come out with the theories now that people are finding, chewy. And I don't find them chewy at all. The idea that there were civilizations prior to the Ice Age does not faze me at all. As far as I'm concerned, I love the fact they keep digging up a skeleton and she just keeps getting older.
Yeah,
it's like,
exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, come on. You're really going to date the world by the last skeleton.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. They do. Yeah.
Yeah, when you know that the further you go back, the harder it is to find something. So just because you haven't found anything yet doesn't mean it means absolutely nothing.
Mm-hmm. Human arrogance again.
Exactly.
We have to be able to see it to measure it, or we have to find it for it to have existed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, I don't know if I had told you this, Charlie, but that's what I am. I'm a history. That's what I have my degrees in. I'm a historian. And so, when I look at Graham Hancock, it's interesting because on one hand, I I have a lot of, I think there's a lot of credence when he talks about at least the research should be done. And I don't think anybody, as you can tell from doing the show, I think everyone, it's good to have conversations about things and to be open-minded about things. And he's met so much resistance from the archaeological world. He had a, I used to listen to him a long time ago, back when he would be on Coast to Coast AM. And he has a TV show on Netflix, and we watched that. I think it was really, really interesting. And it caused a lot of hubbub when it came out. A lot of people were very upset about it. But if you look at there, there's another documentary that just came out on Netflix where they found another Homo sapien, a branch of humans that they think now were burying their dead. And from what they look like, they suppose that they probably looked more ape-like, but they were humans, and they buried their dead. And if you bury your dead, then there's probably some kind of ritual, to burying your dead. And if you have ritual, then why do you have ritual? It's because you're thinking about what is happening.
What's the afterlife
with the universe and the afterlife, and so all of a sudden that opens up a whole lot of doors.
People often say to me about, what you do is a gift. And first of all, my teacher taught me never to acknowledge that it's a gift. It is a craft that can be honed. It is a skill that, whilst you may have some natural ability, you can also improve upon. And any man who thinks he knows everything knows nothing, as far as I'm concerned.
Yes.
But what I'm thinking about here is this idea that we, as humans, have linguistics, right? So back in the day, there was a writer called Jean M. Orwell who wrote Plan of the Cave Bear, Valley of the Horses, Mammoth Hunters. When Daryl Hannah was cast in the role of Cave Woman for one of these films with her bleached blonde hair and ugging all the way through the film, I was mortified because these were really good books, really thought-provoking. And who says that when we lived in caves that we didn't speak, But here's the other thing. When clients say to me, about clairvoyance, which, as we know, means clear viewing, clairaudience, clear hearing, clear sentience, clear sensing, etc. When we are talking about, for example, telepathy is what we think of as the art of reading minds, like we think it's a dirty word or something that a magician uses. I'm convinced that we all have telepathy and that we just ignored it. If I stop wearing my watch, within a few days, I can tell you the time within 5 minutes. When I wear it, I have to look at it to tell you the time. I am also going to refer to things that I've seen at the scenes of accidents, because for some reason, Spirit will keep putting me at the scenes of very big accidents. And one time coming up the M1, there's carnage, cars on top of cars, and engines about to blow, people are pulling someone out. I said to the driver, pull over, came running out of the car. They had pulled this guy out of the car and smoke still billowing out of the bonnet. So they pulled him out knowing the car's going to blow, but then they've all gone into shock. Now, I don't know if you've ever seen people who are in shock, but they all do the same pose without even realising it. They all get their hands together like this, and then they go like that, and they go like this. And it's like chattering monkeys. And in that moment, I looked and I thought, an entire group of people are doing this thing that I've never seen before. And the only other time I saw it was at another major road traffic accident. But it's the same when you watch a film and everyone in the room goes like that, or everyone in the room goes like that, or everyone in the room goes like that. We joke about hear no, speak no, see no evil. Mm-hmm. But in actual fact, we communicate in so many ways. But how do you explain when, for example, you just know that your girlfriend's in trouble And then you ring her up and she says, oh my God, I've had the most awful day. And to me, this is what we call clairsentience. This is the sensing. And she doesn't have to be in the room. We're not reading body language. We're not picking any signals, but we are sensing. And I think that goes back to when we walked this plane, ran from woolly mammoths, had to hunt for our dinners, could only be up, between sunrise and sunset and all the rest of it. And we fight against our body all the time, but we were programmed to behave a certain way. And you know what? The more technology we get, the more white noise there is. I am in my lounge now and I can hear a million noises and it's awful. And when I go asleep at night, it is terrible because I can hear the modem, I can hear the electrical sockets, I can hear the birds outside, I can hear the floorboards creaking. I hear the wind, I hear everything. Now, maybe it's because I'm autistic, I don't know, but I am very, very sensitive to it. And the problem is that once you notice that stuff, you can't switch it off. And the world today is full of too much stuff, too much technology. I go to my Greek island, it's the same island I go to. I've got friends there going back 20 years. When I die, my ashes will be scattered there. And all I'm going to say is when I get off the plane, I literally leave my baggage at the airport. And it's a completely different way of life. The only drama those people have is the one day the donkey got stuck in the supermarket because it couldn't get through the automatic doors.
I love it.
Yeah, it's a different way of life.
The donkey. Yes, agreed. Yes, it's very overwhelming. All the noise and the
nature.
Yes.
Look how we keep trying to save nature. We reintroduce red kites in the county I live in, and they are going rampant. They reintroduced badgers, and now nobody's allowed to kill them, and yet they're killing all the farmers.
Oh no!
They brought over a squirrel from your neck of the woods, brought it here, and it's wiped out the English squirrels.
Wow!
Mm-hmm.
This is human intervention. So every time they say, "Oh, we're gonna counteract the fact that there's this species, we're gonna do this, and we're gonna do the right thing," Alexa, little light off. Yeah, that's me that doesn't like technology.
Yeah. Speaking of.
We do these things with nature and we mess with nature. There's a part of me thinking, does nature correct itself as well? We interfering. It's a bit like interfering in somebody's fate or destiny or whatever, and thinking that we're doing the right thing, then are we by interfering? And that's always a big question for me. How far do we go?
Yeah. And also I guess maybe the same side of the coin or the different side of the coin of that is that we're always fighting against our own selves, forgetting that we are nature too. Just like you said, like not listening to our bodies or, etc. Yeah.
For sure. And I mean, you've only got to look at studies on say, the circadian rhythm and sleep deprivation and mental health and hormones and EMT and all sorts of things. We can see that we are trying to reinvent ourselves all the time. And yeah, actually, at the basis of it all, I sat the other day and I thought, I'm so lucky that I can combine what I believe is my sole purpose with an income stream, because I'm not sure everyone is meant to. Sole purpose can be completely separate from income stream. And how awful is it that some people have to do a job, I'm thinking back to not necessarily even the sex work, but, a job that either puts you at risk, puts your health at risk or whatever, in order to work really, really hard, in order to keep a roof over your head and to keep your head above water, day in, day out, having no quality of life.
Yeah.
And then that's where we get into that whole, is this as good as it gets? And that's where people start getting depressed and all the rest of it. I spend a lot of time with people saying, look, I know that you want to give up your normal job and you think that what you want to do is to find this job where you suddenly become Superman. But actually, that may not be what the universe had in store for you. And I spend a lot of time with empaths trying to explain that, maybe they're not meant to save the whole world. I've got a client at the moment who's on about giving up a job in the city. You know, he's a high-flying banker and all the rest of it, and he's very, very posh. And he's got a country estate in Scotland and all this sort of thing. Comes here in his great big Bentley and all that. And he's like, I was thinking of giving it all up to be a Reiki healer. Discuss this with your wife, you know, because you may not be going skiing next year if what are you going to do? I'm not saying there's anything wrong with Reiki healing, but, you know, just to put it out there, the money that you would make from that wouldn't equal what your wife uses on personal maintenance a month.
Yeah.
You know? And it's like, I don't care about money. And I'm thinking, yeah, well, you will do when you've got them.
Yeah. Yeah.
In the end, we had a conversation about who he really was, and it turned out he was a fantastic illustrator, you know, and showed these images on his phone, and actually, you know, showed him how to, which has nothing to do with being psychic, but how to make that scalable. So instead of trying to, you know, sell them as an artist and make his way that way, but to actually bring out cards on Etsy and repeat the same card over and over again. Remember the lesson I learned about time and the antiques, the same card, and resell that. And he was headhunted by, I don't know if it was Hallmark or Clinton's at some stage. So he went part-time as a banker and started doing the designs full-time. And that really was his sole purpose, to be an illustrator.
Wow. That's amazing.
So, yeah, but it wasn't being a Reiki healer, that is for sure.
Yeah. Funny. Well, let's see.
All right.
I think that I have asked all of my questions, and we have talked a whole lot.
We
about
have
a lot of different things.
A lot of different things. I think there's a million other things we could talk about.
We probably
We
could
have so
just
much
keep
time.
talking forever. Yes. I'm going to pin all of Charlie's links again up at the top if you have missed it. All the links are there if you would like to follow Charlie on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram. And then we also have her website where you can look and see what kind of services she offers. And then there's also a link to her book that she's written. And I'm excited about your next book that you're writing.
Yeah.
What's the time frame on that? When do you think it'll be out?
No idea. I'm terrible. My first book took me 10 years.
Or maybe within the next 10 years.
Yeah. It's funny because every time I think that I've got the number of chapters nailed down, something happens and I realise, Jesus, this is a never-ending book. I think this could actually be an entire encyclopedia of books, you know. I'll leave you on a funny story because I told one of my clients this morning. She was writing herself, so I'll leave you on this note. I had a text a few days ago because one of the wonderful things that I get is feedback from people. So they'll have a reading and then every now and then I'll get an email or a text or a phone call and they'll give me an update. And I got this text and I read it and I was like, hey, read it again. And it said, hi, Charlie. I went round to the back of the building and the door was unlocked. And I couldn't see anyone and I went in and nobody's moved anything, but someone clearly has gained access. What do you make of it? Hey? So I messaged back and I said, I'm really sorry. I haven't got your number saved, so I don't know who this is. But maybe you need to book a reading because I can't tell you anything from this text message. And then I half thought, is he going to message back and say, what kind of psychic are you? But the next response I got was, sorry, wrong Charlie, that was for me boss.
How weird that the name was the same name.
Mm-hmm.
What in the world?
Wow.
Pleasure to serve. Been lovely talking to you guys.
Yes, this has been a wonderful afternoon or evening for you.
Yeah.
Conversation. We very much enjoyed having you on.
For all the people listening on YouTube and listening to this in podcast form, make sure you visit Chat to Charlie at chattoCharlie.co.uk. And you can find Chat to Charlie on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, all at Chat to Charlie. And you can purchase the book on Amazon as well. So definitely go check that out. And
Two is a number two,
maybe-
a numeric two, so it's not chat to Charlie,
Yep.
it's chat.
Yeah.
Yep,
Two,
two, the number two. That's
two.
correct. Chat
Yes.
number two,
Wow.
charlie.com. Make sure you go check that out. And I will have the links on the description for YouTube and all the podcast sites. So you'll see that all there down there, and you can just go and click on the link, and it'll magically whisk you away to where you need
And
to
if
be.
anybody who's listening out there who, feels that they are either at a crossroads and they don't know what's on any of the signs, or they feel that they're at a crisis point, I've got a wealth of experience of working with clients who have been in those situations. I've advised on relationships endlessly, and trust me, as an ex-sex worker, been called by the press a few times, I hate to say it, but a bit of an expert on love and relationships, especially toxic ones. Didn't get the position I'm in because I'm an angel. I got it because I got life experience. And also was very successful in business. So I've helped a lot of people with reading. So partly being psychic and partly giving business advice. So there's a lot there if people feel that they want to reach out. I look forward to meeting you at some point, Jenny.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Chat
I'm
number
interested.
2, Charlie. Hey, I want to ask you one more thing before we say good night to Twitch here, and that's at the beginning of each year on the show for the New Year's Eve special, we do a predictions stream, and we have a lot of our friends, people we've met on the show, and other people who do similar things to what we do, and some people will send us predictions, and we'll talk about them on air that night, and then the next year. Before we start our new predictions, we go back and look at the last year's predictions. So if you would like to participate, there's no pressure, but if you would like to participate, keep in contact with me. And if you have something when we get around to, well, it's not too far away. We're getting there. We're working our way there. Yeah. Let us know if you want to participate in that. It's always fun to look back and see how eerie some of this stuff is, of these predictions that we've had.
The change that we're going to see this autumn will be quite spectacular. And by the winter, some people will be able to avoid what's coming, and some people will throw themselves right into the middle of it.
Mysterious.
And I wish everyone love, luck, and blessings.
Thank you.
It was great to have you.
Charlie.
Thank you so much for coming on. Stick around. We'll talk to you in a second off air, and we'll go ahead and do our little finish for Twitch. So take care, everyone, and we will see you all next time.